Welcome back to the second part of our series on general interview skills. In the last video, we covered the basic interview procedures and the essential principles you need to succeed, from preparing thoroughly and analyzing job requirements, to creating a strong first impression and navigating both individual and group interview. Today, we're going to focus on the practicals and case studies. Let's get started. One of the most challenging parts of interviews is handling the questions asked by the interviews. Questions like "Tell me about the toughest decision you made in the past year" can be very difficult to answer, as your response may not always align with what the interviewers expect. Relax. Here are 4 main approaches you can consider. Mention a corrected weakness, present a strength as a weakness, bring up transferable skills, and illustrate a learning objective. Let's take a look on the first approach first. Imagine you're asked this question: describe the biggest mistake you made in your previous role, and you need to draw from your experience to answer. Let's say there was a group project you did in school. You were assigned to be the team coordinator for a marketing presentation, but you failed to establish a clear communication channel from the start. As a result, team members worked in silos, efforts were duplicated, and the deadlines were missed. The project was submitted late with little coherence inside because different sections didn't align well together. Now, here's how you framed this mistake using the mentioning a corrected weakness technique. You can frame this mistake as a nice answer in 3 steps. First, acknowledge the mistake honestly and take responsibility. You were not a good coordinator in the team. Second, explain what you learned from this experience, including your weaknesses. For example, you realized the importance of communication, but you were weak in coordinating people. Third, describe the concrete actions you took to correct this weakness and prevent similar mistakes in the future. For example, you read many books about communication. The second approach requires careful judgment and strategic thinking. You need to understand what kind of person the company is actually looking for. When you read a job advertisement carefully, you can often deduce the ideal candidate profile. For example, if the job description emphasizes client-facing responsibilities, stakeholder management, and networking events, they're likely looking for talkative, outgoing extroverts who thrive on social interaction. Conversely, if the role emphasizes deep analytical work, independent research, or detailed technical documentation, they probably prefer focused introverts who can concentrate for extended periods. Once you identify what the ideal candidate looks like, you can strategically use the presenting a strength as a weakness technique to your advantage. Let's take a look at a concrete example. Suppose the job title and description suggest they want someone good at juggling multiple smaller tasks rather than focusing exclusively on one large project for months. Perhaps it's a fast-paced marketing coordination role or an executive assistant position where priorities shift frequently. When asked, "What's your greatest weakness?" you could respond with something like, "I find that I'm not particularly good at focusing on just one thing for extended periods. I actually perform better when I can switch between different types of work throughout the day. Some people thrive on deep, uninterrupted focus on a single project, but I've noticed that occasional variety in my tasks keeps me energized and productive. In my previous role, I found I was most effective when managing several smaller projects simultaneously rather than one large initiative." Notice what you've done here. You've framed what sounds like a weakness, but it's actually the exact strength this particular role requires. You're indirectly telling them you're perfectly suited for the dynamic, multitasking nature of their position. However, use this technique cautiously. It only works when you genuinely understand the role requirements and when your weakness authentically aligns with what they need. Sometimes, interviews catch you off guard by asking about something you genuinely don't know much about. They may do this deliberately to see how you handle uncertainty and whether you can think on your feet. For example, imagine you're interviewing for a marketing coordinator position, and the interview suddenly asks, what do you know about search engine optimization and Google Analytics? Perhaps the job description mentioned digital marketing broadly, but you haven't had direct experience with these specific technical tools. This is where bringing up transferable skills can save you while still sounding natural and productive. You might respond something like, "Let me be honest. I don't have hands-on experience with Google Analytics specifically. However, I do have strong experience with data analysis from my research methods course where I learned to interpret statistical data and identify meaningful patterns. I'm also very comfortable learning new software platforms quickly. For instance, I taught myself Adobe Creative Suite within a few weeks for a recent project, and so on." In this response, you first acknowledge the gap honestly rather than trying to bluff, but then you immediately pivot to less directly relevant skills that demonstrate your capability, analytical thinking, and quick learning ability. This technique shows honesty and confidence. It subtly communicates that you're someone who can adapt and grow into new responsibilities, often more valuable than someone who already knows everything. Let's explore our fourth technique with a different angle. Picture this scenario: you're interviewing for a junior project management role, and the interview asks, "Our team regularly uses Agile methodology and Scrum frameworks. How would you contribute to our sprint planning sessions?" You realize you've only read about Agile in textbooks. You've never actually participated in real sprint planning. Here's where illustrating a learning objective becomes your strategic advantage. Instead of the usual acknowledge the gap, then pivot structure, let's flip it. Start with enthusiasm. Sprint planning is actually one of the aspects of this role I'm most excited about. I've studied Agile principles academically and understand the core concepts, but I recognize there's a significant difference between theoretical knowledge and practical application. Then connect it to your career trajectory. One of my key professional development goals for this year is to gain hands-on experience with Agile frameworks. That's actually part of why this position appeals to me so much. I learn best by doing, and I'd welcome the opportunity to contribute fresh perspectives as a team member while developing this expertise under experienced practitioners. What makes this technique effective is the reframing. Transform a potential weakness into a reason why you want this specific job. By doing so, you can show intentionality about your career development. Now that we've explored how to handle difficult individual questions strategically, let's shift our focus to a different challenge: group interviews. Imagine you have applied for a paralegal position. Here's the scenario you and your group are presented with. You notice a paralegal has left confidential case documents visible on their desk while away at lunch, and clients are scheduled to visit the office soon. What steps would you take? Let's analyze what the interviews are really assessing with this question. First, this is fundamentally an ethical and professional judgment scenario. Interviews want to see if you understand confidentiality protocols and take them seriously. Also, they're testing your decision-making under time pressure. The phrase "clients are scheduled to visit soon" creates urgency. Do you panic? Do you act decisively? Or do you thoughtfully balance speed with appropriateness? Third, they're evaluating your interpersonal skills and professional courtesy. How you handle a colleague's mistake reveals a lot about your character. Do you immediately escalate to management? Or do you respect professional hierarchies while still addressing the issue? Finally, and perhaps most importantly for a group interview setting, they're watching how you navigate differing opinions. Some candidates might prioritize immediate action, others might focus on not overstepping boundaries, and others might emphasize documentation and reporting protocols. There's rarely one correct answer to scenarios like this. What matters is your reasoning and how you collaborate with others to reach a balanced solution. Let's quickly break down what this scenario is testing. This presents multiple layers: an immediate security risk with exposed documents, the human element of a colleague's mistake, and organizational protocols. Strong candidates will show they can identify all these dimensions rather than fixating on just one aspect. You should also recognize what information is deliberately missing. How soon are clients arriving? Are there specific office policies? Acknowledging these gaps and explaining how your approach might vary shows nuanced thinking rather than jumping to rigid conclusions. The key principles guiding any good response include proportionality, matching your action to the urgency, professional courtesy, handling a colleague's mistake with respect, and appropriate boundaries, recognizing you're not the paralegal supervisor, so your intervention should reflect peer-to-peer action, not managerial authority. Remember, interviews aren't looking for one correct answer. They want to see your reasoning process, your ability to balance competing concerns, and how you articulate trade-offs between different courses of action. In fact, some responses might be perfectly reasonable in real life but won't serve you well in an interview setting. For example, saying "I'd just quickly cover the document with a folder and walk away" might actually be the most practical solution. It's fast, discreet, and solves the immediate problem. However, in an interview, this sounds passive and unreflective. It doesn't demonstrate the expected critical thinking or communication skills. Interviews want to hear your thought process, not just a quick fix. Similarly, avoid overly simplistic answers like "Why'd tell a supervisor immediately?" While escalation might be appropriate, jumping straight to this without explaining why, or without considering whether you could handle it at the peer level first, suggests you can't handle nuanced situations independently or that you're quick to tattle on colleagues. Avoid answers that sound rehearsed or textbook perfect without acknowledging real-world complexity. If you say, "I would follow company policy, but this is a hypothetical company you're interviewing with," it rings hollow. Instead, acknowledge, "I'd want to understand the specific protocols here, but my general approach would be." Once again, the key is showing thoughtful judgment, not just giving the safe answer. The skills we've explored today, from strategic question handling techniques to navigating group discussions, all point to one fundamental truth: interviews aren't just about having the right answers. They're about demonstrating how you think, how you handle uncertainty, how you collaborate with others, and how you balance multiple considerations to reach sound judgments. These are skills that improve with practice and reflection. And speaking of reflection, we've prepared a multiple-choice exercise for you to revise what you've learned today. It will give you a chance to apply these concepts and reinforce your understanding of effective interview strategies. Thank you for watching, and best of luck with your future interviews.